to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight to the end.
Welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. This is our weekly town hall and radio show. I'm Senator Chase with a little bit of a cold today, so you'll have to forgive my voice. I serve as your state senator in the 11th Senatorial District, which includes most of Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. I also serve as the host each week as we discuss issues that are most important to our area and our constituents. And today I'm really excited to be co-hosting the show with Delegate Chris Saxman.
Former
Delegate Chris. I keep forgetting that.
I don't. I never forget it.
So we're glad that he's in.
Thank you, Senator, for having me today.
Well, we're delighted to have you in the studio today. And it's very interesting to me. I think it's going to be great insight today with Chris, having served as the co-chair of a former presidential race, the McCain campaign. So many of the topics, just for you who are joining us today, that we address on the show are issues that constituents have brought to my attention. This is my first year elected. I am not.
Yes, you are.
No.
You're the establishment.
I am not
Dun, dun,
the
dun,
establishment.
dun.
Chris keeps saying I'm establishment. I am not establishment. I was first year elected, and I've never held public office prior to that. I serve in the state Senate, not the federal Senate, thankfully. I work in Richmond, not D.C., and I have office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you have a question about today's topic, I invite you to call in. I'm going to give you the number, so get out your pen. It's 804-454-1366, or you may email your questions to info@amandachaseforsenate.com. And I have Julianne, my fabulous aide in the studio today. She's going to be taking those emails, so send those in. And we're going to do our best to answer your questions on our show, so give us a call. So let's get started. Today is our pre-election show.
There's an election?
There is an election. Have you heard anything about this?
I haven't heard a thing.
I know.
Must be a local.
So what exactly is going to be on the ballot whenever you go? Hopefully you remember that next Tuesday, if you have had your TV turned off, and sometimes with good reason, it's been a tough year, hasn't it?
I don't watch any politics.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, yeah, you can OD on it pretty quick.
I don't watch it.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
She didn't want that.
I digress.
Again.
So, some of you are saying, what exactly is going to be on the ballot? I know I have to pick a president. There's a possibility that you could have a congressman, and there's also 2 ballot questions on there. There's 2 amendments, and we're going to talk specifically about those 2 ballot questions, those 2 amendments that you're going to get to vote on. And in some counties, we actually have some special elections. Did you know that, Chris?
I did, Senator.
There's a state Senate race, there's a House of Delegates race, and a couple city local offices. So if you're frustrated at the presidential level, there is still a reason to go to the polls and vote.
There's always a reason to go to the polls and vote.
So just a quick quiz question here.
Oh, please do this to me.
What time are the polls open on Election Day? Do you know the answer?
Early in the morning.
Do you know what
6
time?
o'clock.
6 a.m., that's right. So
I used to get up in Highland County at our farm and go to the local polls in Bluegrass and thank the ladies working the polls at 6:02 in the morning.
That's right. And that's where I'm going to be.
Not in Highland County.
Not in Highland County. I'm going to be right here in Chesterfield County.
Good for you.
Casting my vote. So 6 a.m. is when the polls open, and they're going to close at 7 p.m.
That's right.
So hopefully you vote early.
Well, at least if you're in line by 7 p.m., you'll still be able to vote.
That's right. So the key is to get there by 7 o'clock. So don't forget. So everybody knows the presidential candidates and the vice presidential candidates. For Democratic Party, we have Hillary Clinton, Tim Kaine. Republican Party.
Virginia Senator Tim Kaine.
Yes, you are correct.
I think we need to let the audience make sure we know that.
That's exactly right. And the Republican Party, we have Donald Trump and presidential candidate. He's congressman, actually. I should say congressman on here, Michael Pence.
He's governor of Indiana. He was a congressman for about 12 years.
Yes, he was. You're exactly right. And I met him. He's a really nice guy.
Is he?
You know what I like that he says? He says, I'm a Christian first, conservative second, and then a Republican. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually.
I mean,
We have the Libertarian Party. We have Gary Johnson, Bill Weld.
Former governors.
Yeah, running for president. We have...
two Republican former governors. Who, Gary Johnson from New Mexico and William Weld from Massachusetts.
Very good. Green Party candidates. Who are they?
Jill Stein, and I believe the last name of the vice president's candidate is Baraka.
That's exactly right.
There you go.
You get 10 points.
We
should make this into a game show.
Really?
No.
Do you really want me to be a game show host? I don't think this is what you want.
No.
I've always wanted to be a game show host. Like Wink Martindale. Remember him?
No,
He was
I
outstanding.
think that was
Bill
before
Cullen.
my time. I'm
Bill
a little
Cullen.
younger.
You're not that much younger.
All right. So independent electors are going to be for Evan McMullen, President Nathan Johnson for vice president. Okay, so we did our due diligence on those candidates right there. Let's talk about some polls. What are we looking at today? What are they saying? Not even 2 weeks ago, Clinton was leading by 12% on the ABC News Washington Post daily tracking poll. But today, Clinton only leads Trump by 1% in that same poll.
Yep.
Wow. That's a big change.
They're closing.
Trump's lead in the LA Times USC daily tracking poll has increased from the usual 1% lead to a lead of 5 to 6% in recent days.
Yeah,
That's
I
incredible.
think when this election is done and what finally comes out, because of the nature of this year being a political realignment like we haven't had in at least a generation, some polls are going to be spot on accurate and some are going to be embarrassed. And I don't know if the LA Times is going to be embarrassed because they have Trump up and have had him up continuously by more than a couple points. And then you have the disparity in other polls all across in various states. And I think that's attributable to the I'll say discombobulation of this election cycle. And I think it's hard for pollsters to accurately poll what's truly going on. So as we were talking earlier before we came on the air, Senator, it's very important for the audience when they're looking at home to view this like they would a baseball game, football, or basketball game. Don't follow the ball. Understand what's going on behind the scenes. So when you see, Hillary Clinton going to Detroit and Pittsburgh tomorrow, there's a reason. She needs votes in the Metro Detroit and Metro Pittsburgh regions. And that's where you see what's really going on deeper in the polls, in their own internal polls, because they're tracking it on the ground, what they're pulling out in their daily reports that come up to the field offices, where they need to get their votes out. Mm-hmm. That's where the candidates go. That's where the advertising dollars go. So polls can be kind of inaccurate from what's really going on.
I have never been a huge fan of polls. I just have to be honest. I mean, I look, especially in the last couple of years, you look at Congressman Dave Bratt's race, totally got that one wrong.
Again, it's hard to poll who shows up, especially when all the negative advertising is out there, especially when I think we have a political realignment occurring that we have not seen in well over a generation. I think before the 80 election of Reagan. This is a realignment, and folks have to understand that. And polls show you so much more than just who's voting for the top line ticket. Once you get into the crosstabs and figure out who's voting for what and what demographics and what age groups, then it gets fascinating. In my election, my first poll, I had a huge problem with women between 25 and 45 on the issue of crime. So what did I do? I went out and rounded up all the sheriffs and Commonwealth's attorneys and got their endorsement, and it was a tough on crime package. And that covered that gap. So that's what polling shows you. It's more than just who's winning and who's losing. If you dig deeper in the crosstabs and you ask questions about why they're doing what they're doing, then you can attack it in your political strategy and tactics. That's why it's important.
Would you also say that a couple of things are also happening? First of all, people are using their cell phones now, and so a lot of the information that we have to call people from is old home phone numbers. If you look at the information the State Board of Elections has, and when you're a candidate, you have to sign your life away, and you get this list, and you can call the numbers, but most of them are home numbers, and most of them are not good numbers anymore. And so I think some of that's changing as well, maybe.
It's very difficult to find the people who are not only eligible to vote, but are going to vote.
And likely voters is also changing, I think, because we have, as in the last, I guess since the Tea Party movement, we've woken up a whole generation, a whole group of people who formerly did not vote. They were not involved
Well, I think that's
at all.
on both sides of the aisle. You find people, because what they're doing is they're trying to find voters who they can't count on their votes, because once they show up in the primary voting rolls, the campaigns know pretty much who they're going to vote for, and that's locked in. If you vote continuously in a Democratic primary, you're probably going to vote for not Donald Trump, right? Same way it goes for the Republicans. So when new registered voters come out, they need to both parties try to get them into their voting operations.
Right. That's exactly right. And we've got about 30 seconds 15 seconds before we head to the break. But you all stay tuned, because we have a lot of interesting poll data. We do want to talk about the 2 constitutional amendments. And then we also want to talk to you about the Electoral College versus the popular vote. So stay tuned. Thanks again for joining us on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and Delegate Chris former Delegate Chris Saxman. Keeps reminding me former. When I used to go to the General Assembly, I used to go and support his bill, so I still think of him as Delegate Chris Saxman. He'll always be Delegate Chris Saxman to me, but anyway. So we were talking about polls, and the long and short of this is it looks like things are looking much better for Trump, who, as of 2 weeks ago, it looked like he was out of the race. If
you look at the polls, I would have to agree with you. Here's an institutional structural problem with the Republican Party nationally, though, and even in the state, is that the Democrats are better at a ground game and have been since 2005. After the Kerry loss, the Democrats figured out that they had to organize their precincts at a much more intense level in order if they were going to win. They also have fewer primary battles, nomination battles. And when they do, a la 2009 when McAuliffe and Deeds and Brian Moran were challenging each other, they realize if they have uncontested nominations, they are going to have a much more likely win. And that's been something the Republicans have yet to adjust to within the marketplace. And I've said to many audiences over time, I just think the Democrats are better at politics right now.
Well, and another thing, as you mentioned, and I see this in the state Senate, a lot of my fellow Democratic senators have been there for many, many years, whereas on the Senate Republican side, we have a lot of people who are challenged. We have a lot of new people.
Yep.
And, that can be good. I mean, it's good to have new, fresh blood in there, but you still have to have the institutional knowledge.
Well, not just the institutional knowledge. I'm not referring to institutional knowledge of the governing structures, but institutionally campaigns. Your campaigns have to have a rhythm to them. As you know, as you had to ramp up your campaign, it takes a lot of energy.
Yes, it does.
And to maintain that takes a lot less energy. And the Democrats have figured out the more they put in the infrastructure, in the institution of their campaign infrastructure, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to win elections. Republicans haven't quite figured out the math on this.
Yeah, I think Republicans are very protective of their turf in a lot of ways. We have a lot with the Tea Party. We've had a lot of challenges, a lot of people running against establishment candidates like myself. I was going to say like myself.
As the establishment.
Because, no, I'm not the establishment. He keeps saying that. I am not establishment. He's going to get
We're going to get calls.
And to show that I am not establishment Republican, I'm not afraid of being on the air and being recorded because people were saying, we don't normally do that. And I said, well, we need to think outside the box. We need to stay in touch with our constituents. We need to communicate. They need to know what's going on the inside. We need to be more transparent, which is why I also co-founded the Transparency Caucus. People want that. They're tired of the backdoor deals and all that. But I digress.
No, and I would agree with you. There's also a balance to be struck in that.
Yes.
Sometimes people don't want to know the hard truths of governing and the deals that have to be made and the compromises that are constant in our governing structure, in our governing process. It's unsavory for them. I was listening to on the Michael Savage show before we came on the air. This guy was extolling the virtues of Michael Savage because he's so pure and he's so dedicated to these principles. I'm like, well, that's great. Politics is different. It's like I say in some columns that I write. Politics is a lot like marriage. You can be right or you can be married, but you can't be both. Right? And politics is about making decisions that the other person necessarily agree with, but still getting something done. And it doesn't, and it's hard, that's hard to translate on a bumper sticker or in a primary, especially when you're making really tough decisions. So I agree with you. More transparency is inherently a good thing. But there's a point of diminishing returns. There's a point of diminishing returns.
I think people want to know. I think they have chosen by their own accord for years and for decades even, maybe not to get involved. But one thing that I like to see, and I'm so encouraged by since the Tea Party movement, is that you have more people who are new to politics. So maybe they don't have the knowledge base, but they have the desire to get involved. And I think they want to know. They want to know how the sausage is made. And, that's why we've done the radio show. That's why I'm on Facebook all the time, even during session, showing people kind of what's going on, even on the floor of the Senate. And, not everybody in my caucus likes that.
Well, I would agree with them because there's a lot of things that are going on that aren't as known and necessarily should be known at certain times. It's a very complicated, as you've learned, and as we have discussed privately. Right. It's far more complicated than what it appears, and what often comes up on social media is so far away from the truth. That is true. It can be very harmful to the process in producing good tasting, thoroughly cooked sausage. Well, to that point, I think it's important for our listeners because they're very busy. I mean, they've got to, they don't have time or the patience to listen to the news. I mean, I get tired of the news. Hearing what's going on. I mean, it's just after a while, it sounds like, Well, that's part of the problem because it is so much. The volume of information available to anyone who wants to get interested in politics. And as a former history and government teacher, I can't recommend enough people getting more involved in your democratic republic. But you have to get your facts straight. Well, you have to get some of the underlying issues and how things actually work because they do work well if you understand the process, the rules. As you well know, the rules of the Senate are very different than the rules of the House. Right. In the Virginia. Same way at the federal level. And some people just don't want to know that. We live in a push a button, press an app, flip a switch, take a pill society that doesn't necessarily equate with let's take our time and try to understand how this works. They don't get that. And they don't have to get that. That's not their role. That's not their job as constituents. So let's talk about what's going to be on the ballot again, as we mentioned earlier. Okay. Let's talk about the two constitutional amendments that are going to be on the ballot this year. One of those is the first one. It's the right to work. And I know some of my friends and even my daughter was voting. And she called me up and she said, Mom, what does this say? What is this? Should Article 1 of the Constitution of Virginia be amended to prohibit any agreement or combination between an employer and a labor union or labor organization? And it just goes on and on and on. And she said, Mom, help me understand this. What does this amendment mean? And I think what I'd like to do is just share briefly that voters will have an opportunity to decide whether they would like to include a right-to-work amendment to the Constitution. It sends a strong signal that Virginia is open for business and committed to creating more jobs in our state. We're going to talk a little bit about both sides of the issue because I think it's important for people to understand. That is current existing policy is right to work in Virginia. And we used to be known as the northernmost right-to-work state, which we are no longer. We're still right to work. This is just putting it in the Constitution so it's more difficult to amend or take out. It's a policy decision. The Virginia Constitution is different than the United States Constitution. The way we amend it is very different. It's easier to amend it in Virginia, and it basically makes it more difficult to change laws. That's one thing I learned in the legislature. The Constitution is more difficult to amend. It's still amendable, as we find out. So it's a policy decision. I would recommend voters go in there, look at it, read it, and go, do I want to do this or not? But, so the general gist, people are like, what is right to work? I mean, basically, this First Amendment, it prohibits making union membership a condition of employment. I mean, if we had to put it in a nutshell. And we got 30 seconds. Currently, as you said, Virginia's right to work law bans businesses from requiring their employees to join a labor union as a condition of their employment. The proposed amendment places the provisions of Virginia's right to work law into the Constitution of Virginia. And as Chris had mentioned, the law has been a part of the Virginia Code, and it's been there for about 70 years. And the constitutional amendment will not change that. So we're going to talk about who should vote yes, if you feel this way, who should vote no, when we get back from this break.
36.
I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight till the end.
Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and former Delegate Chris Saxman on WNTW 820 AM, The Answer. And we're talking about elections and being prepared when you go to vote next Tuesday. We're talking about the two amendments that are on the ballot that you'll have the opportunity to vote for. And what happens if I say yes to ballot question number 1? Let me tell you what's going to happen. It's going to add the right to work to the state constitution. But if there was an effort to repeal the law in the future, what's going to happen then? How would we change that? A statewide referendum vote would be required to reverse it, so the people would have to take it out of there. What happens if you vote no? If you vote no, nothing changes. While Virginia law may be amended by any future General Assembly, a constitutional prohibition can only be changed by a future constitutional amendment approved by the voters. So let's talk about reasons why we would vote yes. Number 1, it sends a strong signal that Virginia is open for business. It's committed to creating more jobs in our state. Supporters of the right to work constitutional amendment argue that a constitutional amendment is necessary in Virginia because the current right to work statute can be easily undone or amended by future general assemblies or rogue judges. Pro-business groups, and I'm assuming would Virginia Free, who you're executive director for,
Correct.
Have a position on
we scored that legislation, and we scored it favorably.
Okay. Pro-business groups argue that the right to work law is good for Virginia workers because it gives them the option whether or not they want to join a union, and good for business because they said it brings jobs to the Commonwealth. And Ryan Dunn, who is the executive vice president of corporate and government affairs for the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, said that right to work is actually a restriction on employers, but one that they think is worthwhile. Basically, giving people a choice about whether or not a union is right for them is something we think is worth preserving. Okay, so we're going to present the other side. Anything else you want to add on supporting?
Yeah. This is when I was a former teacher.
Yeah.
I would advocate for this on just the basic nuts and bolts of the issue. I mean, a lot of people say it shouldn't be in the Constitution, and I think people misunderstand or misapply it to the concept of the United States Constitution. The Virginia Constitution, and as maybe you'll find out in your time in the legislature, is sort of like the stopgap, because you can change laws fairly easily in Virginia. It takes a lot, though. I mean, you can understand that, what it takes to pass a bill. But there's certain things that I feel as a way to stop them. This is how you make sure it doesn't change, and that's the Virginia Constitution. That's sort of like the backstop, the firewall, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's a policy decision for the constituents. Is this what I want, or is this what I don't want? I think it's pretty easy.
So let's look at the other side. The other side of it is why would I want to change things? Why would I want to do this? And some have argued that not every good law deserves to be raised to the level of constitutional writ. A speed limit of 25 miles per hour is maybe a good idea, but do you want to write the speed limit into the Virginia Constitution? Some say that it kind of clutters up the Virginia Constitution. Again,
I would offer anyone to look at the Constitution of the Commonwealth if they have concerns about this one and say, is this consistent with this kind of policy written into the Virginia Constitution? Mm-hmm. There's a lot in the Virginia Constitution. People would go, really? That's in there? Why is that in there? So that's part of the conundrum, I think, for most constituents is it necessary?
I know that Russell Wade, who is the head of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Local Lodge 10, said, right to work has been a state law since 1947. To my knowledge, it's never been challenged. Right to work laws are something of a misnomer. They do not necessarily guarantee anyone the right to have a job, nor do they guarantee any other workers' rights. That is Gina Maglianaco with Virginia AFL-CIO. Amendment 1 does not change that law, but it proves that legislators don't trust voters or future elected officials to make their own decisions about what's best for the Commonwealth. So the local labor unions oppose the amendment because they claim it is a solution searching for a problem. So that's the other side. And I always do like to present,
I think that's a fair representation.
Yeah. I know everybody's going to ask me, I am going to vote yes on this in case people are curious. I think it's good for business, and I want to do everything I can to bring employers to Virginia. We need jobs to be successful as families, and I'm all for it.
Okay.
So let's do it. We're going to look at the second ballot amendment. This one's a little bit easier, I think. It says, shall the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to provide an option to the localities to exempt from taxation of real property of the surviving spouse of any law enforcement officer, firefighter, search and rescue personnel, or emergency medical services personnel who was killed in the line of duty. So stay tuned, and
That's
we come
one.
back. We're going to have the answer to that one.
Here I go, I'm on my way with my love glasses on, got my love glasses on.
Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and former Delegate Chris Saxman
Dun, dun, dun.
on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. And I'm going to give you that phone number again so you guys can call in. It's 804-454-1366. So give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
That number again, Senator?
804-454-1366. Okay, so we were talking about the Second Amendment on the ballot. Everybody knows now where they stand on that First Amendment. We're talking about the Second Amendment now. Over the last 6 years, Virginia voters have indicated their interest in providing property tax exemptions for veterans, spouses, and first responders when the individual is injured or killed in the line of duty. This amendment will allow localities to extend the personal property tax exemption, should they choose to do so, to surviving spouses of first responders who are killed while serving their community. I support this.
You probably voted for it.
I probably did. Go figure.
Now, these are, and this shows the complexity sometimes of state law and the Constitution, because this seems like something just you would pass into law. But the way the tax structure is set up, this just gives the General Assembly the opportunity to present to localities to give them the option. So it sets in motion the opportunity to do that at the local level.
So is there a fiscal impact?
No, there wouldn't be, because this is local taxation. So the local governments have to be given the authority to do so by the General Assembly. This is just saying that the people of the Commonwealth give the General Assembly the authority to give it to the localities if they so choose.
That's right. So what would be the opposition to this? Why would anybody say, hey?
Well, I mean, I think for the most part, people would say, well, we shouldn't be giving all these tax exemptions out there and creating a mishmash of the tax code. What's the next step? How long will this? What's the next bill to be put in to create another exemption for quote unquote political purposes, to ingratiate yourselves with public servants? But the fact of the matter is, most of the people you're talking about here don't make that much money.
Right.
If the property goes to a state and has to be sold because the spouse can't pay the taxes, this is what we're talking about. I don't think it's a big fiscal impact for the local governments. Some might be more so because of the smaller nature of the local government, but that's for them to decide.
Right.
And this just gives them that tool to say if that's what they want to do, they can do it.
And really, quite honestly, it's better to give the decision to the localities than they can decide, whether they want to do that or not.
Yeah, well, in certain situations, that's what the General Assembly is through the Constitution and the way it's set up. That's why we're a deal and rule state. That's why we have so many pieces of legislation. If the local government wants something, it has to come to the General Assembly for the approval. So this is part of that process.
Very good. All right, so everybody understands where they stand on that. So, just out of curiosity, there are currently 26 right-to-work states in the United States. I didn't mention this earlier. 8 of those states have constitutional right-to-work amendments. Virginia was the 5th state in the country to become a right-to-work state when the state's law went into effect on January the 12th, 1947. There's just some interesting things. So, everybody knows where they stand now on Amendment 1, Constitutional Amendment, and the second one. So we're going to go on with a discussion of the Electoral College versus the popular vote. And I've actually had a number of constituents to contact my office this week and say, hey, where do you stand on this? The United States has a unique election system. The people, as you may or may not know, do not directly elect their president. Instead, they elect electors that will go to a function known as the Electoral College, and the time between the general election in early November and the January inauguration ceremony. Typically, these electors pledge to vote for whoever won the most votes from the state they represent at the college. This system was put in place by the founders so as to allow states to decide for themselves how they would like to vote for president, as democratic election of the executive was not taken for granted like it is today.
Well, it was also to make sure that the smaller states had a greater role than the size of their population in the formation of the country. That was sort of the majority versus the minority rights and power balance that they had to strike, and that was part of that. Otherwise, Virginia and New York would have been the most powerful states, and they would have chosen the presidents based on population, whereas smaller states still have a role in this. I mean, look, our candidates are going to the 2nd congressional district in Maine and competing for votes there because that's a separate electoral vote. New Hampshire is getting a lot of attention because those electoral votes are up for grabs, and that's part of this process.
And I think it's very important for our listeners to understand that, because many people, their knee-jerk reaction is, I want to go for the popular vote. But let's just break that down, like you said. If a candidate has to win the popular vote, what states are they going to go to?
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily states.
Yeah.
It would be population centers,
Right.
especially as more population goes to suburban and urban locations. California's not in play. The people in California might disagree with things. Like, well, why doesn't anyone pay attention to us? Well, they have 55 electoral votes, and that's just the way this thing is set up. So, but there have been movements to try to get to an electoral, do away with the electoral college in favor of the popular vote. But those kind of changes, I think, are very difficult to make in America.
So we can think of the Electoral College kind of like the World Series. Wouldn't that make a great
No, we
analogy?
can't. We're not
here?
going to do that to baseball. Don't you touch baseball.
Congratulations to our Cubs fans.
Congratulations to the National League, showing once again the designated hitter should be outlawed.
So let's just talk about the Electoral College. And yes, I am going to compare it to the World Series because I can do that. One
It's your
person,
show.
one vote equates to the World Series champions being determined by total number of runs scored. If let's say the Dodgers win the first game 10-0 and the Yankees win the next 4 games 1-0, the Dodgers win the series. Even though the Yankees bested the Dodgers in 4 games, it doesn't matter because the Dodgers scored 10 runs to their 4. One analogous game decides the whole series. Without the Electoral College, a few heavily populated states decide the whole election.
That's a great analogy.
Great.
Because back in 1960, I remember you probably remember this so well from your college years.
I wasn't born.
Was that not nice? That wasn't nice. The Pittsburgh Pirates were outscored 2-1 by the New York Yankees, and yet the Pirates won the World Series on a walk-off home run by Bill Mazeroski, one of the greatest home runs of all time. And that does underscore, and I think is analogous to what you're trying to say. So it's a great analogy. I apologize.
I accept your apology. So that said, I do support, and I've commented to constituents that have called in. That's why I do support the Electoral College.
And I would offer to your constituents in the radio audience to watch the electoral votes as they are tabulated and throughout this weekend and what states are in competition.
All right, stay tuned for the final wrap-up on AM 820 WNTW, The Answer. All right, welcome to the final wrap-up of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and former Delegate Chris Saxman. And before I forget to tell you, election night, I'll actually be on CBS 6 Facebook Live and live stream coverage on their website and on their panel. So tune in election night. I'll be there from 6 until 10 o'clock, and we'll be monitoring the results as they come in. It'll be exciting. Before you go to the polls, remember to take your ID with you.
Your valid
ID. A photo ID at that.
That is correct.
A lot of people are saying, you know what? I can't find my voter registration card. It doesn't matter. You know why? It does not have your picture on it.
Well, no, that can be valid. Well, if you,
You have to have a picture ID.
do you now?
Yeah, it's the
Wow.
new law of the land. See? There you go.
You guys keep changing the laws.
We keep changing those laws. That's right.
You guys in the establishment.
So bring your driver's license, your passport, your government issue ID. You can even take a college ID. And I did not know this, but did you know you could take your employer ID as long as it has your picture on it?
No, I didn't even know you had a picture ID. You quizzing me on that?
It's a good thing we had you on the show.
What else you
today.
got?
Oh my goodness. So I hope you all have learned a lot today.
Who was that quote from?
Oh, that's right. We were going to give
The
credit
baseball
to
quote?
Donna Carol Voss.
There you go.
Yeah, she had a really great idea with that whole World Series
It was
analogy.
great. Spot on.
That's exactly right. That's what we needed to hear today. So we need to tell people to go out and vote. I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Okay. What are you looking at me for?
And I'm also voting yes on the 2 amendments. And I'm also voting for Congressman Dave Bratt.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
There you go.
That's it.
Just cut to the chase on that one.
I'm just cutting to the chase. I'm just cutting to the chase on that.
I'm nonpartisan, so I'm staying nonpartisan.
You have to stay nonpartisan.
I like being nonpartisan.
That's what
Love it,
that's
love it,
what
love it.
establishment moderates like to do. They like to not.
Like you.
I am not.
You're voting for the establishment.
So, anyway, so next week we're going to
And
have
your website's now establishment.com?
it's chaseforsenate.com.
Okay.
You know, you have to have people to keep you grounded. I'm so thankful for former Delegate Chris Saxman.
Thankfully.
So we are going to have post-election coverage, and we're going to have the Republican Party Chair of Virginia, John Whitbeck, coming on next week.
He
Yeah,
went to Occidental College, by the way. From
really.
California originally. He went to the same college initially that Jack Kemp went to.
Amazing.
And I think that's also where Barack Obama started his academic career.
Those are, what I love about our establishment friends is that they have all this great knowledge.
So you're saying the establishment's really smart?
I am.
Wow.
I think some of you are.
You're getting close there. Our meeting is, by the way, next Friday morning at the Sizzler, the establishment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't invited.
Okay.
I wasn't invited.
No, we
to
don't
that
have a
meeting.
Sizzler. That's the joke. Gosh. It's at your local buffet. How easy is this?
All right. So I hope you've had a good time on the show today. Chris, thanks for coming on
Always
again.
a pleasure to see you, Senator.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Tune in next week, and don't forget to vote Tuesday.